Welcome to the DNA Advantage podcast, where you can learn facts about your DNA that can help you live a healthier, longer life, doing all the activities you dream of doing. If you want to gain more control over your health and the factors that influence it, you're in the right place. Hi there, I'm Lisa Witherow, and I'm with the DNA Advantage, and I am committed to helping people understand how they can improve and protect their health. One of the biggest connections that people don't make right away is how many times they make decisions in a day and they don't see how it affects their health or how it affects the outcome, like their performance during the day. Athletes who have performance goals that are very fine-tuned, all the way to people who have aspirations to live longer, feel healthier, experience more joy in their lives. All of those require health and require specific input for your body. Today, I will be talking about focus and attention as a primary issue that people can experience. And we're going to go through a case study just to give an example of how I work with people, looking at all of the nuances of the body and how the body processes things, how the body gives you signals, and what your DNA can tell you that will help you become better in all the areas that you desire. When we experience issues with focus and attention, it can affect our whole lives. It can affect our work and our relationships, our capabilities to learn, and even our sense of self, our self-worth, and our confidence. When we have focus and attention issues, it can be very frustrating to feel like something's always pulling you in a different direction. There's always something stacked behind what you're doing right now that is going to pull you away. And it distracts you from what you're doing, can make you feel like you're never going to finish anything fully, and you aren't focused on the details to do your best possible work or to have your best possible performance. It can be exhausting. And I think that's probably the biggest element, is that so many people experience this challenge of being torn in different directions, and they turn to self-medication in order to compensate, in order to just survive. There's an attempt to make your body more balanced. And in fact, what it does is cause more rebounding and more imbalance. But in the moment, it can feel like it's some resolution. It's giving you an opportunity to be a little less chaotic. And that is a good feeling in the moment. But unfortunately, that rebounding and that downside of self-medicating, whether through alcohol or drugs, can be more of a detriment than a benefit. This is true even of prescription medications. And I have had several clients, including this particular case study, who have told me that they don't like the way that the medications make them feel. So it's really important when it comes to focus and attention that we look at the big picture and we understand what is the root cause. The racing thoughts, jumpiness, fidgeting, busy mind, constant chatter of the mind really makes it difficult to sleep and impossible to feel relaxed, which a lot of people end up creating activities to occupy their brain, and they will do other things when they're supposed to be sleeping. They'll stay up on the computer and they'll play games or read or do things that will give their brain more activity when in fact the brain needs to be at rest. And there are things that we can do to identify how to disconnect and get the brain to calm down. The diagnoses associated with focus issues include ADD, ADHD, insomnia, anxiety, depression, chronic stress, and even bipolar and OCD can have an element of focus and attention issues. And it's important to understand what the underpinnings are and what are the root causes that are contributing to the symptoms, what is the large picture view of the symptoms so that you can actually understand your body. We're not just labeling your situation and assuming that you will have this for the rest of your life. There are ways to support the body and compensate for genes or processes that are inefficient. And once you find what they are, it can be really empowering. Some of the underlying causes that we see with focus and attention issues, we want to find, we want to really hone in on what your specific needs are. And investigating the history of the symptoms can offer a lot of insight. There are several questions that I'm going to list for you that you can ask yourself, or I would ask my clients if you ever work with me. Investigating things like, what are your specific symptoms? When did they start? How long have they been going on? And how intense are they? Do they fluctuate and they're really severe at certain times of the day or certain days of the week, certain seasons? What is going on in between? Are you seeing that there's improvement or that your symptoms are relieved at certain times and you just accept it and keep going, but you don't really document it? Are there certain things that seem to help or make your symptoms worse? And certainly listing the things that you've tried and what level of improvement each intervention has provided you, because that gives us a hint. Even if you say it helped take me from being a 10 off the charts, I'm completely unable to focus, to a 7, it gives us an idea of where we are on that spectrum and what that medication or that intervention did for you. And then we can either ramp up what support you need for that particular function, or we can investigate what that mechanism of action of the intervention was. The case study that I wanted to go over was a client that I had years ago. And I've worked with many clients with focus and attention issues and with different presentation. It is different for a lot of people, but a lot of the common elements of not being able to study, not being able to feel comfortable in the learning process or in the work environment, and really trying to get a sense of what is happening for each person is really helpful. This was a 16-year-old male who complained of sleep issues, inability to stay on task, and often left things half finished. He was a high school student and he wanted to get a job, but he was afraid. And actually, his mom was even more concerned about him being more challenged and having difficulty with the overwhelm that was presented when he had multiple responsibilities. When we drilled down into his symptoms, he had trouble falling asleep, but usually stayed asleep, except on weekends. He would wake up in the middle of the night on weekends and not be able to go back to sleep. Whereas during the week, he would fall asleep and he would be able to stay asleep on the weekdays. It didn't seem like that was an issue. He would have trouble getting assignments done, and group projects were usually difficult for him to stay engaged and on task. And most of the time, it would fall on other people in the group to finish the project. He would contribute here and there, but a lot of times he would feel like he was contributing at a lesser degree than the rest of the people, and he would feel guilty about that. He would feel himself procrastinating. And when we talked a little bit about that, he said maybe it was because he felt insecure and that he couldn't get anything done and was just too distracted and didn't even want to start because he didn't feel like he would accomplish anything. He said he always had a little trouble staying on task in school, especially in certain subjects, but it had gotten worse. He was about 14 when he really started struggling and having difficulty with it. There's always that possibility that the demand was higher at that point. His classes may have gotten more difficult, but overall, it seemed like everything kind of shifted and became a little bit more difficult when he was 14. These are all things that are helpful to dive in deeper. And I just was on a fact finding mission at this point. He wasn't sure what would make it better or worse, and he felt that the weekends were harder to concentrate on homework if he had any, but he wasn't sure if there were things that made it better or worse. He was 15 when he tried medication, and he knew that it didn't really help him from a focus standpoint, but it did challenge his mood and his energy. He just didn't feel like he was on task at all. He didn't feel like it helped him, and it caused him to be irritable. So he stopped taking it after 6 months or so. When we reviewed in more detail what his days and nights looked like, we looked at nutrition, activities, supplements, and stressors. At that point, when he made it clear that he didn't track anything and he wasn't really sure what he ate on a regular basis, he could give me things that he liked, typical lunch or typical breakfast. So I asked him to keep more of a journal of everything he was eating, even if I could just get a sense for a week, what he was eating, what his stress level was. In terms of his symptoms, if he could rate his focus and attention and see if it varied or if it was really consistent like he expected, and tracking it Monday through Sunday. We identified some key factors, and I was able to get him to monitor the potential influences pretty well in that first week, and it got better even the second week. But the first week, we noticed that his snacking of processed foods was more than he had thought. Initially, when we talked about nutrition, he felt he ate pretty healthy, other than some chips, maybe some sweets and some sugar. And it seemed like he was drawn to sugar. In this first week, he didn't need to change anything. He just needed to track it so that we could get a sense of what was influencing his brain at this point. The first week, we noticed he drank less water than he believed that he had, and he was on his phone and computer more hours of the day than not. And he didn't have time to do much outside and wasn't currently in a sport. So his activity level was pretty low. When he rated his focus, he was pretty consistently low, but surprisingly, it was much worse on Sunday and Monday. We originally thought it was going to be Saturday and Sunday, but when he rated it, it became clear that Sundays and Mondays were the lowest. And we narrowed in on his activities on those days, looking at activity level of the whole week. The weekdays, he was pretty consistent until we hit Friday. And then Friday and Saturday were definitely different because he was gaming a lot and he had a lot more free time because, again, he wasn't in a season with his sports, and he did not have anything that really inspired him to go outside. It seemed that had an influence on his brain activity on Sunday and Monday because of that gaming. And that was just a hypothesis. He continued tracking other factors like diet, exercise, and hydration. It was looking at what was going on rather than imposing a lot of change at this point. The second week, we found that his game time on the internet was much longer on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he also ate out more with friends on the weekend and snacked while he was on the computer instead of eating well-rounded meals like he would more so during the week. So those were the differences that we were seeing. And despite his mom's intervention and trying to get him to eat healthier and trying to get him to be more consistent, it was his behaviors on the weekends, trying to let down his guard and give himself a relaxing element, which he felt that gaming was. It was kind of backfiring. We planned to add more structure to his schedule. Ultimately, we didn't want him to get caught up in the gaming and all of the habits that were drawing him down. And we wanted to give him every opportunity to improve his diet and hydration and make some small tweaks that would give him a sense of improvement so that he could continue. The next week, he did show some improvement, although it was difficult for him to make major changes. He made the small tweaks in the amount of time that he was on his games and giving himself an opportunity to eat fewer snacks, eat more regular meals, schedule his time with his studies right after school, and drink more water for sure instead of pop. He felt good about it overall. So we gave him several weeks to actually implement more of this. We said, let's cut out some of the sugar. We wanted him to use his time wisely and not be on video games as much. And even selecting which video games, because sometimes what can happen is we can get caught in fight or flight if we play tactical games that are shooting and running for your life kind of games, because your brain doesn't know the difference between a game and reality. So if you're playing for an extended period of time and you are not giving your brain a break to realize that you're safe and not in any immediate danger, you can get stuck in fight or flight. And we don't want that for anyone, no matter what the age. That can put you in a position of protection. Your brain doesn't take the time to focus and to look at math problems and prioritize that. The brain is looking at, how do I get out of this situation and survive? So do keep in mind that the types of games or the types of activities that we're in or the types of shows and movies that we're watching could put us in fight or flight. And if you recognize that you are showing signs of that, shifting your content or minimizing the time that you spend, hours and hours, would be more likely to put you in position of protection. So we made a plan for better structured schedules, diet and lifestyle adjustments, and I gave him several weeks to work on that while we were waiting for his genetics to come back. We were able to see several ways when we saw his genetics to personalize his plan. We were able to establish a personalized diet plan that was specific to his needs in areas that he could not absorb or convert certain nutrients efficiently. He needed to eat more of that or supplement with that. And we did put in a supplement that was a well-rounded multivitamin and made sure that he was also getting omega-3 based on his information on how he processed omega-3s and the fact that he doesn't eat a lot of fish. When it comes to gaming, even though he was limiting his time on games and was being more selective, I did recommend also, based on his genetics, that blue blocking glasses could be beneficial to minimize the impact on his brain and in keeping him alert and awake too much, which would interfere with his sleep. His schedule was definitely improved, but I gave a few more guidelines for his activating games and how to break it up into different segments. And certain herbicides and chemical exposures were a surprise in his genetics that he couldn't handle. And there is a connection when it comes to focus and attention, because if your body is busy trying to maneuver around or manage chemicals that our body isn't getting rid of efficiently, it can be very distracting. Sometimes we hit a tipping point. Let's say we're eating non-organic produce and we're eating meat that is not the cleanest. We have things that are in plastic and being heated in the microwave. It's just a buildup. If we just address our eating habits, that could change a lot, because we're dealing with plastics, with herbicides and pesticides. And if you shift all of that, that could help. If that is a challenge for people because they don't want to change what they're eating and they don't want that to be the first step, the other things that you can focus on, what are the other exposures? Start to look at environmental exposures and artificial fragrances that might be in the environment or that they're putting on cologne or perfume, deodorants, and chemicals that they're washing their hair with, and things like that, because it does accumulate in the system, especially if we don't have really efficient detox pathways. And that is what we can look at in the genetics. For him, caffeine in moderation is a good thing. And I was able to see that in his genetics and was able to recommend that for a particular time frame, typically in the morning. If he had a test or he had something going on that he needed extra focus, that caffeine could be leveraged, but only a small amount and before 2 o'clock in the afternoon so it wouldn't interfere with sleep. Short exercise sessions throughout the day could be really helpful for him. What he needed was to move and get the energy processed, and using that energy in a very targeted way can be increasing alertness and also getting any kind of accumulated energy out. So there, the fidgetiness and the frustration of not moving, that is actually part of what was going on with him, it seems, because as soon as he integrated that, it really seemed to help. Minimizing sugary foods and drinks was also highlighted when it came to his ability to process sugar. And it's not just because of the focus and attention, but also his ability to manage insulin. And at his age, we weren't seeing anything with his blood sugar, any kind of issues that were highlighted, like as in diabetes. But when it was spiking, it could very well affect his focus and attention. When it was dropping, it could very well affect his focus and attention. So it could be a precursor and giving us kind of a red flag that there are issues with him regulating his blood sugar. And of course, if he's eating really poorly, that's just allowing for that to become worse. And we don't want that to become a long-term issue for him as he gets older. The supplements I mentioned, in addition to the multivitamin, there were other supplements that helped him compensate for poor absorption, and also stress management was really helpful for him. So, giving his body the opportunity to release some of the stress, I think some of the short exercising stints that he was doing throughout the day, we would set a timer on his phone and give him some really basic exercises and fun things that he could do. It wasn't like he had to run a mile or do anything crazy. It was short 10-minute opportunities to just move his body and do things, even with friends, that he could do throughout the day. And it really did seem to help. Ultimately, he ended up feeling so much better. He felt like he had more control over his focus. He was able to improve his grades, and he felt like he had more enjoyment with his friends instead of always feeling stressed out that he wasn't able to get his work done. And then he would have to labor over his homework instead of being able to go to the games and the activities after school. So it's really something that made a difference in his life pretty significantly within the first 6 weeks. And I was really excited to see, because, like I said, everyone is different. And when you look at each situation and you're able to see how a person is affected, it doesn't require that we do DNA analysis, because you can get a lot of hints simply by looking at the clues like I've gone over. But I wanted to give an example of what that looks like and then how we can take that a step further with DNA. Focus and attention serves us in every aspect of our lives. We really do want to be able to have as good of control over our focus as we possibly can. And I know that some people have had this experience all their lives and they feel like there's no opportunity for improvement. But I assure you that when you look at nutrition and when you look at the range of your processes and you think about it, it's very unlikely that you're always at the bottom of the barrel. You're always at the very lowest point. You have good days and bad days. You have good times, times that are really better, and you feel like you're really on and you're really working on all cylinders. And then there are other times that you feel like you're just struggling. And what I want is for you to be able to identify what you can do to be at your best performance most of the time. And then when you go and get your DNA analyzed, then you're able to even up the ante and really get better so that you're improving I don't want to see people struggle all the time. The way that Western medicine trains us to do is just accept that this is our plight. This is what we have to deal with. I completely understand that it is difficult. There is some process that you have to go through to really begin to understand your body's functionality and all the clues that it gives you. But that's why I like to help people walk through that and really begin to understand. And then you can move forward on your own and really understand yourself and know when it is that you need help or when it is that you need to be intervening and doing something different. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or want any support, you can certainly contact me, and my information is going to be posted below in the show notes. And if you have any topics that you would like for me to cover in the future, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining me to learn about DNA health. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you'd like to join my free community where we delve into more details about DNA, just click Community below.